Hello and welcome to today's Iron Path Expert Series webinar. Today's session is entitled MDF Secrets Revealed. My name is Ted Hulsey. I'm CEO and founder of Iron Path and your host for today's event. Two quick housekeeping items. This session is being recorded and will be circulated to all registrants. Please ask questions as we go along. Iron Path is pleased to host today's panel discussion. Iron Path helps MSP leaders achieve their dreams. We deliver sales and marketing services to MSPs and growth-oriented vendors. I'm personally excited about today's topic. MDF is a vital resource for MSPs, VARs, and channel partners. Support from vendors is critical to help partners achieve best-in-class growth rates and to achieve your goals. In my own experience, I've spent nearly 15 years on either side of the table, approving or requesting millions of dollars of MDF. Now let me introduce our panelists. First up is Charlie Coughlin. Charlie is a channel marketing consultant and has over a decade of experience with MDF at companies such as SonicWall, Quest, and Dell. Next up is Janine Edwards. Janine is Senior Director of Channel Marketing at StorageCraft. Notably, Janine was formerly Director of Communities at ConnectWise during the company's formative hypergrowth stage. Welcome, Janine. And finally, Joe Mansour is MSP Route Manager at Lenovo. Over the past few years in a prior role, Joe was also deeply involved in Cisco's MSP Partner Program, where MDF plays a large role. Joe, welcome. Now let's turn things over to our panel. Okay, well, let's get into the conversation. I think one thing that's really important is, in terms of who's joining us today, there will be marketing professionals and business development leaders from MSPs, some of whom know a lot about MDF and some who this is fairly new topic. So I just want to start out with a definition and just throw this out to the panel. What is MDF? Somebody explain it to me.
Right.
You want us to answer?
Yeah.
I mean,
yes.
it's the initials stand for market development funds, right? And it's the sort of universal idea that a partner can, depending on their loyalty or threshold of revenue that they need, or their ability to standardize and commit to a vendor, the ability for them to utilize funds to drive pipeline for more reseller type, product-led folks, or customer acquisition type of engagements if you're an MSP. That's sort of how I understand it. I don't know if you guys thought I missed anything there.
Yeah, I mean, it's money used for sales and marketing purposes, right? At the very fundamental, it's money that you get allocated for sales and marketing purposes, right? Designated campaigns, products, platforms you may use, subscriptions, things like that.
Yeah, and I think at some level, it's one thing that just think about it is it is free money. It's not, you have to put in effort to get it, but in most cases, it's what vendors are looking for is they're looking for your level of commitment to their brand and their product lines, a commitment to the sales and marketing programs they're putting out in the market. And if you show that level of commitment or have that level of commitment, the dollars are there. And these dollars can help you turbocharge your marketing budget. And really it should be, I think anyone who's in the IT channel, they should think about MDF. There should be a significant line item in your operating budget every year that defines, hey, this is how much we're getting from MDF from our vendors. And it should be like a meaningful percentage of that budget if you're doing things right.
For sure.
So talk to us a little bit about partner programs. So normally a partner program, and feel free to speak about specific examples, but a partner program will often specify the rules of the road for MDF.
Right. So this would typically be for MDF, those that are eligible or higher level partners that have shown significant amount of revenue. But that's not to say that it isn't available for partners that may have not shown the revenues yet, but they have a business plan in place. They've got a relationship with the CAM that they can establish some sort of plan to put this program together.
I mean, programmatic MDF funds are more specific. They're more set in stone how you earn the dollars, and it's usually based on the revenue that you're bringing in with that vendor. It's pretty straightforward. I'd say it's the very first form of MDF that you should look into when you're working with a vendor, because it's the most straightforward. There's documentation, a very clear pathway for how you earn the funds.
Right, and I mean, Joe, we've worked on this in the past with Cisco, for instance. That, I mean, I think one thing, to your point, Joe, I think one thing everyone should take away is you should go back and look at the composition of your revenue and the product lines and strategic vendors that you sell a lot of, and do a little bit of homework to find out if you're already qualify for a program that's in play, that's out there, that all you have to do is actually apply for it and then get engaged with the program. Because sometimes those dollars are fairly automatic if you go through the process of enrolling in that particular vendor partner program and do some of the legwork that the vendor requires. So Joe, maybe comment on the Cisco MSP program, because I think that's a good example of one where it's fairly predictable, but there is a process.
Yeah, so I mean, there were two trends that I saw when I would engage partners when I was supporting that program, and when I would onboard new partners into the program, it was a complete shock to them that they weren't already earning these funds. I mean, the fact that they hadn't been notified about this program in advance, that they hadn't been signed up for it, and the question I always got was, well, how retroactive is it if I sign up for this program now? What funds can I earn retroactively? And then the flip side of it was we had a lot of partners who were in the program who didn't utilize funds because they didn't know that they had earned the funds, right? Mm-hmm. And so you have to do your homework. You have to know with all of your strategic vendors what these programs are, how to get into them. And I think just having consistent communication with your resources at that vendor and your distribution resources as well, right? If you don't have a specific resource at your vendor yet, or that you know of, maybe you're not doing a ton of business yet, but you plan on doing it. A lot of the times I say start with your distribution assigned rep, and they're going to get you in touch with people at your vendor to figure out what those programs are and make sure that you're signed up for them.
Yep. To that point, communication. If it is the distribution rep, or it is your channel account manager or your inside rep, ask that question, as Ted talked about. One of those line items at the beginning of the year should be MDF. Am I eligible for MDF? What's the MDF program look like? What does it take for me to qualify, et cetera? So that communication's got to be the first thing. To ask whoever that contact is, and what's MDF? What's the process with you as a vendor? And how do I get involved?
Charlie, I think you touch on a really important point. Communication is a two-way street on this topic, but I think I want to highlight a huge challenge that the vendor community faces with partners is that almost every vendor has an MDF program, and almost every vendor has a person or a team of people whose job it is to get the word out to the partners. The problem is that most partners do business with roughly 40 different vendors. And they all have like a special folder in their email inbox where all the vendor email goes, and it's 40 times 4 a week times 160 unread emails. And that's kind of like, sadly, like the challenge most channel marketers inside the vendor organizations face is that you got to get the word out. You got to get the word out, and sometimes your message isn't getting through. So to Charlie's point, you got to flip it around. If you want to be in the pole position and get more than your fair share, you do have to ask the right questions. But Janine actually knows how to get past people's email inbox filter. So tell us about that.
I think what you're saying is accurate, that it's more about the if you've ever done any sort of transaction with any vendor, you're receiving, their marketing emails. I will say though that I think that as you and I and Charlie specifically, when we think about Paul Dipple and this idea of operational maturity, we've had a lot of exposure to that, right? And both the traditional VAR and the MSP have levers that really push up operational maturity, either in their organization overall or where it matters for their P&L. And one of those on both sides is standardization. So even though, yes, they're hearing from, the idea of standardization allows you to not only create all of this great goodness inside your organization to drive efficiencies, but now you're building loyalty and love and goodness with your vendor, right? So, and that's where the MDF, the way that you don't accrue it. You are at a certain level, it's proposal based. So if you're at a certain level, all you have to do is ask for it, right? Just like you guys say, we make it that easy. You ask for it very easily. You tell us what you want to do, and we will fund 50% if you're able to show us, the value, right? So it's not even that you're accruing it. You're just sort of asking for it based on your level of the program. But your level of the program obviously goes higher if you're standardized on us, and you're in that particular category across the board. The more you standardize and put, loyalty and effort against working with as little vendors as you possibly can, not only works on your profitability side and your operational maturity side, but it also helps you on this sort of MDF journey, if you will.
Yeah, and I think, just to chime in on that or double click on that point, I think a really important best practice around MDF, I think every partner is looking to say, to Janine's point, how do I standardize? How do I simplify my life? How do I simplify my stack? How do I get better by going deeper with certain solutions? But even when you've done all of that, I think probably to be effective with MDF, you do need to narrow that list. Even if you've done a great job kind of narrowing the range of vendors you work with, you still probably need to identify 4 to 6 vendors who are your go-to partners that are strategic to you. And strategic means probably, well, either the technology is super important, they solve a really big problem for your clients, or you probably sell a lot of their product. And because you sell a lot of their product, on the other side, you have a more receptive audience at the vendor side in terms of having those conversations about proposal-based MDF.
Yeah, as soon as I see an MDF request come in, I first look at, okay, what's the revenue with this, and not just the level, but okay, what do we do? And are they on the cusp of being a high growth partner, right? Or so it's really, it is a two-way street as far as, am I going to give this money to someone who I know is already, especially on the reseller side, you kind of know that you're working together to drive pipeline. On the MSP side, it's not as tangible, right? It's really about customer acquisition in a different kind of way, where they're not totally talking about your particular product necessarily, whereas on the VAR side, they are, right? They're driving initiatives that really say, we're selling more of this vendor's product transactionally. On the MSP side, they're packaging it up, and you're helping them either educate the partner on a category, right, that you fall into, or helping them with, general customer acquisition in some way. It might not be directly related to your brand. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I think just to kind of recap one point. So we kind of talked about 2 different programmatic ways that vendors kind of roll out MDF. One, you may have a really strict threshold to get into a certain program tier, but then the dollars are very predictable. And I would say that the Cisco MSP program in that category, that has its own benefits. And then I think Janine and Charlie talked about other programs where, yes, you do need to rise in the ranks, but then it's kind of like then it's like you guys, the vendors, then saying, hey, partners who are SonicWall Gold partners, go ahead and submit your request to us and we'll entertain them. But it's not, you have to put a proposal together to say, hey, this is how I want to spend these dollars to get this outcome. I want to do this kind of campaigning to get this outcome. So those are really kind of 2. And then I think a third category is kind of co-op, which is less common today. And co-op would be where you get a certain percentage of everything accrued for everything you sell. Right. That's a less popular format today just because it has its own negative aspects around that kind of approach.
Well, then there's a fourth category. The fourth category is we identify you as a high growth partner, and we're gonna come to you and suggest a program and 100% fund it, right? And do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. So that to us is when we identify partners we really want to create a lot of momentum around, have quarterly business plans, as Charlie alluded to when we were sort of having our discussion the other day and today, and really trying to go to them and say, let's lift you up with these funds, and it's 100% funded. And we look at you, to make sure you're able to carry out and look at these opportunities. But to me, that's another fourth category. It's we're backing it all,
This is why
Oh, sorry, Joe. One other point, Janine, you mentioned about, your higher level, your higher tier partner, you're driving the revenues, but I look in, if I'm in my quarter, myself as a channel marketer, and I have unused MDF, and I have a partner that has the potential to grow with me, and they've got a plan. It doesn't have to be a completely baked plan. I've communicated with the channel account manager, myself, and the partner. We're many times we're willing to make those dollar investments, even if you're not at this level. If we can make it some sort of justification to get this MDF through, we'll do that as well. So that's another thing to think about for partners that may not be at that revenue threshold today. It's worth having the conversation with the CAM, with the channel marketing person, to say, hey, is there a way that we can make this work? I've got a plan, a potential plan together.
Yeah, so I think this is when we take a step back and we look at the reason for why you might standardize with a few vendors, and you look at the vendors who have the most opportunity with. Vendors have no shortage of MDF. I mean, that's one of the things I've learned, is that there's no shortage of MDF that they have available to provide. And they don't have enough people raising their hands on the partner side saying, I would like to spend this money. And so, yes, there are programmatic, obviously, like the very beginning of your research when you're looking at a vendor, you're going to look at the programmatic benefits of getting MDF. But as we discussed, there are 3 or 4 and at Lenovo, it's like this too. There are 3 or 4 examples of earning MDF that are completely separate funnels for how you would actually accrue it. Some of them have more guidelines as to what you have to do when you get the money, and others are a little bit more, hey, let's create a plan together, and you don't have to have everything baked out yet, but show us that you have skin in the game, right? And we'll allocate those dollars. And there are community funds too. A lot of vendors have communities that they've put together for partners who fall into a certain segment. Maybe they sell into a certain vertical, or they sell into a certain segment very well, and they're looking for thought leaders in those spaces. And so they onboard partners into these communities where you can collaborate with each other. They allocate MDF dollars into those communities as well. So that's like a non-traditional, that's not programmatic, that's not like you having to do a certain dollar amount. That's you getting involved, knowing who your vendor is, and having consistent communication and getting into those discussions, those communities, right? Getting yourself involved.
And so let's talk about how important it is to have a single person, a single point of contact on the partner staff who's responsible for MDF. Can somebody comment on kind of what you've seen there, what's worked, what hasn't worked?
Single point of,
go ahead.
oh, sorry. Yeah, I was going to say single point of contact. From my perspective, one of the top of minds is that I know they're familiar with our program. I know they've checked all the right boxes. It's not a matter of me saying, oh wait, has this partner, are they doing all the right things? Is this going to drive new business for us? If I know, if it's someone I already have a just any sort of relationship, if I have a relationship with them, I know they understand the process. I'm more than likely to go to bat and get these approvals done and us execute the program.
Yeah, and I I mean, that's something that I've always seen. Like, I think one really important piece of advice for all partners is to, usually this is a sort of thing where this could take up easily, say, like 1/4 of like a full-time head's time. I mean, if you're able to very successfully go and get, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 of MDF from your vendors every year, it pays huge dividends to have one person on staff who looks after this. And so it's just, I think, to all the points we made earlier, yes, rightly or wrongly, the vendor universe does put a lot of bureaucracy into the process. That's just a given, right? So it's bureaucracy times 40 vendors, right? Okay, solve part of that problem by narrowing the number of vendors down to a strategic set of vendor partners, but then have somebody on staff who actually is responsible for chasing down the details and getting to know the details, and then is the human being behind the MDF request who can answer a call or answer an email or a question from the channel marketing team, for instance.
And I don't think you have to have a marketing expert to be the one who handles this necessarily. It's just the person who knows the money that's coming in through MDF. They don't have to be responsible for coming up with the plan for all of these marketing dollars, because at the end of the day, just as vendors have marketing dollars that they have to allocate to partners, they have marketing platforms that they work with to spend that money once you have a campaign. And they also use resources like distribution to get involved when they're engaging a lot of partners that, you know, they can't do a lot of things at scale. And so sometimes they engage distribution, and you can actually go to your disti team and say, hey, look, I've got all of these marketing dollars, but I don't have a marketing expert on my team to actually create the campaigns to spend that money. There are all sorts of resources out there to help you with the actual campaigns once you have dollars in budget, right? And so that's some of the feedback that I've learned from working with a lot of MSPs is so many of them tell me that they don't have a marketing person yet. They don't have the resources to do that. And, you know, I've worked enough of these MDF programs that there are other ways that you can get marketing assistance. You know, there are experts that are there to help you, even when you don't have the resources yourself.
Yeah, I would play devil's advocate with you on that, Ted, a little bit, because like, just as Joe's saying, I mean, when you're looking at a managed service provider who is even in growth mode, they typically do not fund a full-time marketing person, right? And so you have this polarizing sort of set of profiles, right? You can really look at that in more of a traditional reseller or project-based, you know, who's you know, working a lot of pipe and plumbing. That makes sense, right? They typically have a marketing sales type of engine that's a little bit different looking than a managed service provider. I think it is reasonable to say it's 20% or 15% of someone's job role somewhere in the organization to chase this down. It's also harder, I think, as an MSP to sort of raise up the ranks as it relates to revenue thresholds with one or two vendors, right? So you have to kind of like think about that too. Are you getting money from a few different of your vendor partners to create a campaign, or are you all in? It's just sort of what I'm saying is the profiles are different. So I'm not sure it's always realistic, as Joe indicated, to think that an MSP, you know, even larger size ones, have a full-time marketing. Maybe it's more of a you know, a front desk type person, admin who also does marketing, things like that. But I think you need to be realistic about that ability in their, you know, people count.
But having someone, if it's available, having someone they know, so it's the second, third MDF request that they've done with me. That person, again, not having to be a marketing expert, no expert, they have the familiarity. I have that comfort level with them. Okay, they know the process. Everything else, you know, is me as the channel marketing expert, as them as the partner organization. All the other stuff we've got to work out. But if they know that process, that eliminates so much of that piece. So perfect world, yes. If there was one person in the partner org that was handling that, they know our process. That cuts that part of the whole thing out of it, the whole admin part of it.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess I would respond, great comments. And, you know, it's really a crawl, walk, run situation. Try to really honestly assess where you are in terms of resources. If you don't have a full-time marketing person, you can make sure that this admin duty does rest with somebody. And over time, if you have one person working on it, they're going to get better, and they're going to get more effective at it, and they're going to become that single point of contact for the vendor staff to respond, which is very valuable. So let's talk about requests.
Yeah.
Let's talk about MDF requests. What is an MDF request, and what makes a good MDF request?
From my perspective, well, it's a couple of things. I don't want to make it so cumbersome that the partner has to fill out like a 9-page document that tells me like, and also promises me their firstborn. Like, what I want to know is, you know, because we're mostly proposal based, right? So you're telling me if you give me a good idea, and the idea is going to end up with, as an MSP, you selling more managed offerings because I know I'm a part of your technology stack, right? Or as a VAR, and again, we work with both, a traditional VAR that says we're going to drive pipe together and we're going to expect, you know, this kind of ROI from it. And the ROI is an important piece. every single partner, whether it's an MSP using ConnectWise or Autotask or whatever, or they're a PSA or VAR who's using SFDC or something else, or everybody has the way to track a campaign. If you don't, you need to, right? So if I'm going to be able to ask you, did you create a campaign? Can you tell me how many? And you can give me actually like a screenshot of you tracking that campaign, right? And me knowing that you generated this many leads and you promised me that in the proof of performance, and I also see what the event looked like. So we make it very easy. We have a request. It's a very simple form. You get to fill out a paragraph about what you're going to do with it. You tell me what the whole amount is, and then we have a claim. And the claim part is a little bit trickier. You have to make sure that you're giving me the things you promised you would give me, and then we pay it out within 30 days. So we try to make it easy, but we also try to say, we want you to think this through. I don't want it to be like keeping you an hour to do this, but I also want you to think it through and be able to tell me what your expectations are, and then tell me if the event rose up to those expectations.
Right. Yeah, I think, Janine, yeah, to your point there, we as a vendor don't want to make it difficult for you as a partner to get the request through, because we know the value of it. But submit a request and it says event, and that's all the information there is on there. It's going to make it a lot harder for me to get it through all the additional approval tiers that there are. So if you can give some detail on what the event or the activity is, some idea on, we never know what sort of potential ROI would there be. There may be 15 people at an event. We anticipate $15,000 in pipeline, et cetera, and go from there. And then obviously having that conversation, communication with the CAM and or the channel marketer is going to be helpful for that. And then, yeah, from the claiming side of things, we want to make sure that we've shown all the due diligence, that there's an invoice, there's a picture of an event or the web advertising or whatever it is. Yeah, I mean, that's all typically would be detailed in the guidelines as well. But yeah, as long as if we show that there has thought put into this, I look at it like, if myself as a partner owner, what do I want? If I'm making an investment, what do I want to see? What justification do I want to see? And I'd want to see the same thing in a request. And again, not cumbersome, because we want to give the dollars, we want to get the activities going.
And I'll throw in something from what I've experienced with MDF requests. I've seen a lot of requests come in where their requests are very limited in scope as to what they're doing. It's almost as if they don't want to tell us what they're doing because they feel like it's some sort of secret, or that we're going to decline something if you don't give enough detail. It's almost as if you give more detail than you wanted to, and then because you gave more detail, there was a little, well, in the terms of our contract, it says you can't do this one tiny little piece in there, right? And I think people get held up on requests, especially MSPs get held up on MDF requests when the vendor asks for some sort of brand recognition, right? So if you're working with a larger vendor and they say, hey, we're going to allocate MDF dollars for this project of yours, we need to see that our name is somehow represented, right? You can't go asking a big vendor for marketing dollars and then be advertising their competitor, right? But simultaneously, if you work with a number of vendors to create a solution, as a lot of MSPs do, you're selling a solution, not a brand. MSPs can get a little, well, hey, I really don't want to make this about Cisco or Lenovo or whatever company is providing the dollars. A lot of vendors understand that. And when you submit requests, they need a detailed description of what you're doing, but they understand that you're not going to be like advertising their name through the entire thing. You're going to be advertising a solution. You're going to be advertising your services, your trustworthiness, the fact that you're an advisor, and a lot of these vendors get that. So when you submit the request, communicating with the team who reviews those requests and understanding, okay, what are the boundaries, and explaining yourself when you're on like the edge of that boundary, when you know that you're probably not providing as much as they would like, but give a reasoning as to why you're doing it, right? A lot of them will understand that and they'll still approve it. They want to see that you have skin in the game. That's the main thing, right? And if you provide that context into your activities, they'll approve activities even if they're not full branded, you know, hey, this is going in with Cisco, you know, like they'll still approve things even if the branding is light, right?
To Joe's
Yeah,
point,
I mean, and you talk about like the teams, or I mean, it's me. Like in my job, it's me. So I'm a person, and I treat it like a person, right? So I'm reading it, I'm thinking about it. I know a lot about partner businesses. I make it less of a transaction and more of a, you know, me thoughtfully thinking about how this. I approve claims and I approve requests. Me personally, at the highest level of channel marketing position in the organization, I have a team, but because of my familiarity and my with the solution provider organizations, both VAR and MSP, I'm in there looking at it and thinking to myself, knowing what's going on with these partners and their, you know, business dynamics. I want to give them money. I want them to sell more of our stuff and their stuff. So if it makes sense, I'm going to approve it.
And to that point, so in organizations that I've been at, some of them, there are multiple tiers of approvals. If myself as the channel marketer and or the CAM, well, we have that relationship with the MSP, we will go to bat. I have gone to bat and said to, you know, if it's someone in finance, this may not have our branding on it, but this is a partner that's dedicated to us as a vendor. This activity that they're doing, that we're investing in, is going to mean revenues for us. We'll go to bat for you. If we have that relationship with you, that we have the communication of what's being done.
Right. So just to kind of recap a couple important things. So I think to the points that Joe made, you have to be mindful that the channel marketer who's sitting on the other side of that approval does often want to see maybe some mention of a vendor in the marketing, but it doesn't need to be central to the message. Everybody, I think all the channel marketer, I think things have matured so much in the industry in the past 10 years that most vendors and most channel marketing organizations do understand that the partner is taking a solution story to market. The partner is primarily trying to get new clients, not necessarily sell vendor XYZ. I mean, selling vendor XYZ happens when they get the new client. I think everybody understands that. But you ultimately do need to include some content or some plug of the vendor's brand, probably, or you just have to be super clear in how you're connecting the dots between your business growth and how that results in new business for the vendor. So, I mean, just make it crystal clear. Like every time we get a new client, we put in a new SonicWall firewall, we put in a StorageCraft backup, we go in and refresh their servers to Lenovo or whatever. But you do need to connect those dots and make sure it's clear for the channel marketer that hey, this marketing activity is going to generate business growth for the vendor.
Right.
And a couple other things that were mentioned, I just want to kind of double click on. But Janine, you mentioned pipeline and leads. Charlie and Janine both mentioned pipeline and leads, pipeline and leads, pipeline and leads. And I'll just throw out there that the vendor folks, like all day long, that's all we talk about is pipeline and leads. And it's like, oh, you know, pipeline review meetings. And, you know, partners are just in kind of a different world that the sales, there's not as many salespeople, there's not as much sales maturity. You don't have the scary VP of sales guy breathing down your neck in most cases if you're in a partner organization. And so I think it's very important for partners to understand the world that the channel sales and channel marketing team is coming from, that everybody's just kind of like breathing down their neck for more revenue growth. And you need to remember that you are allies to helping that get accomplished. And you need to kind of speak the language of the channel marketing team and say, oh, I get it. Whenever I get a new client, that creates pipeline for you. Got it. Okay, that needs to be in my MDF request. That needs to be in my write-up on the results we achieved, because that will make the channel marketing team successful, because they're able to say, we generated this many leads, we generated these many deals, this much pipeline dollars, and that's why this MDF investment is so valuable.
Right.
So,
I mean, just to cap off on that, I mean, on one side of the fence, I don't want to make it difficult for you guys to ask for money, but on the other side of the fence, I can't just give you money that I think is getting thrown out of a window. You know what I mean? So you have to have a fine balance that says, okay, and even if it's, you know, customer acquisition for an MSP, okay, is this initiative going to help you get, even if you're owner-led sales, 4 more meetings with a small business or a medium-sized business that's going to buy into your managed offering, right? Or on the bar side, are you going to, if you're having an event, are you going to invite 10 people and you hope 3 of them turn out to get interested into the, the solution we're selling? So, I mean, even the smaller MSPs or the larger bars, whatever, everyone has some way of tracking initiatives, right? And so I'm just asking for you to tell me how you're going to track that initiative, whether it's sophisticated or not very sophisticated. I'm just asking for you to tell me how that's going to look,
Right. And can I take one step further on this? So after the MDF request is approved, after the claim is done, we're all done from an MDF standpoint. But what is helpful is whatever the time frame, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months down the line, when you're having your planning review session with your CAM, hey, by the way, that event that we did 6 months ago, whatever the activity was, we also generated additional revenues or pipeline. That's going to be helpful going forward to the next year. That's more additional. Just it doesn't matter for this specific MDF request, but it's helpful for us to know, we made these investments with this partner. We saw revenues obviously jump, but specific to these campaigns, we can attribute actual revenue later on as well. So that's something to think about. 6 months, 9 months down the road, what resulted from that MDF funded activity.
Yeah, and I think it's so important to understand, I think it's so important for vendor staff to walk a day in the shoes of the partner and really understand what they're going through and be empathetic there. But I think one of the things that can make you kind of like an MDF Jedi Master in a partner organization is to really have empathy for the vendor folks and to understand that these stories that Charlie was just talking about, where you come back and share and say, hey, remember we did those lunch and learns, and we weren't so excited about the turnout rate, but but the quality was really high, and we only generated like 2 opportunities per lunch. But by the way, 6 months later, we closed this monster deal from this client that we met at that lunch. Writing up that story in an email and sending that off to your vendor staff to tell them about that is solid gold. Because Absolutely. That email makes the rounds internally on the vendor side, and it validates everything that the channel marketing team is doing. It validates the business model. It validates the continued investment in MDF, and it validates the strong relationship that the vendor has with certain partner organizations. So I want to change gears. Let's talk about what is working. What are some of the best marketing programs that you're seeing from partners today?
Back to what Joe was talking about, and this isn't partner, for partner doing it, but some sort of program that we have in place. We work with a third-party vendor. We've got a multiple marketing program, telemarketing, digital marketing campaign, emails, etc. Those campaigns, we pull in multiple partners to do that. Those campaigns work, because we've vetted it out. As for what's working, what we see partners, obviously this last year, a lot more on digital marketing campaigns. A lot of those are still being proofed out because it's for some partners that's a new motion. Events, the virtual events, they are, but they're not this year. I don't know. I think I'll pass it to Joe and Janine for additional comments.
There are some fun events that I've seen. Sometimes they're easy to approve, sometimes they're not easy to approve based on what you're offering at the event. Sometimes the vendors who you get marketing funds from have restrictions on, like, you can't have alcohol at an event or something like that. But really, I think the virtual events have really kicked off, and there's a lot of interest behind it because I'll admit, I'm not like this. I'm not the person who stands out at a party and wants everyone to notice me. I've got a crowd of some close friends, and I'll go to a party, I'll hang out, but I don't want to be seen, right? And so a lot of people who are a little nervous to do those in-person events may be more comfortable doing those virtual events. And we've had virtual events internally at the company, but I've also seen a lot of campaigns that partners have seen success stories for, where they'll do like a wine tasting event, or they'll do like a gourmet coffee tasting, right? Something that you wouldn't do on your own, something that like interests you, but like you're not going to spend time to go out to one of these places to do, but they'll actually deliver, you know, like coffee grounds to your door or samples, and then everyone involved in this event, there might be like a presenter talking about, you know, someone at that company who sells the coffee might talk about the different blends and the flavors and some FAQs, some fun things that you can learn about it. And then after that event is done, after you had your fun, you know, then they'll have a presentation on whatever the product is, whatever the solution is. And it's a way for you to get personal, you know, personal with your customers. This isn't even just for like new leads, bringing in not existing customers, but the ones that you have, the ones that you're trying to grow. This helps you from a distance build a better relationship with them. And I've seen tremendous success from those, getting away from just a simple webinar to an actual like, hey, we're going to do something together. You're going to share your screen. You're going to, you know, we're going to talk about something interesting, and then we're going to go into our discussion, right?
Yeah, to that point, yeah, I think that virtual and physical connect. You know, Joe, you talked about, you know, we've got a mixologist on the webinar, and hey, we just shipped you out a small little bar or whatever it would be, or, you know, we're doing you know, some other you know, virtual webinar, and we ship something out to you. It's that physical virtual connect. Those have resonated. You know, obviously we're all challenged with, you know, it's now you know, 14 months in, and how do we keep that spice going? That's, you know, that's
Yeah, so I would agree. I think, yes, they were very, very effective, those kinds of things. I saw, you know, a bourbon tasting go really well, you know, but again, I think we're starting, if we want to get ahead of it, now we're seeing a little bit of exhaustion on those. And we need to think about reopening and what will be the next wave of MDF type events that are slowly taking us back into person. You know, maybe it's celebrating that we are able to be together, some kind of fun way of doing that. I think that I'm seeing a little exhaustion on the virtual events. So not to say that they can't still be effective, but during the pandemic's height, I think they were extremely effective and a great way to pivot and have a little fun, right? Exactly how Joe said, making it sort of, let's do something fun at the beginning and interesting. We had a couple of wine tastings where we had the sommelier from the vineyard take us through the blend. We sent everybody the bottle of wine. It was very cool. And then we sort of had an open discussion with some of the customers about what their businesses are doing, et cetera. And so those were successful and interesting. But again, I think if we have to all start getting a little bit more looking forward and saying, okay, what are the next things that are going to engage customers in a way that makes sense for where we are in the world, you know?
You know, one thing that with customer events, you talk about, Janine, when we get to that stage where everybody's you know, face to face. Customer events at times, admittedly, I would hedge, but in all reality, customer events I think are very valuable. Now that when we do all get in front of each other physically, it's like, hey, let me wrap your arms around you. I love you, customer. And by the way, let's think about how do we, you know, from a vendor standpoint, how do we upgrade, how do we cross-sell within this customer? So don't forget about those customer appreciation type events as well.
Yeah.
I think this will be an important time for that.
So great advice. Keep it fun. I mean, the pandemic will be over at some point, and you know, start planning your physical event strategy because they will come back. You know, every part of the country has a little different flavor about how things are unraveling and unfolding. But I mean, whether it's virtual or it's physical, keep it fun. You know, keep it fun. Tap into people's curiosity about wine and cocktails and coffee and just enjoying life, in addition to being experts about technology. And then to Charlie's point, you know, however you do it, drive engagement. I mean, this is a very intimate conversation with the four of us here today. Hopefully our audience is appreciating that and are getting to know our speakers on a kind of a personal level. So try to make it accessible and intimate while also delivering valuable educational content. I mean, it's fun to always have like a gimmick, like the lunch and learn at the steakhouse, or the wine tasting, on the virtual call, but also, deliver valuable information that solves their business problems, because that's ultimately the thing that gets butts in seats and gets people to events. There's an insatiable desire amongst business professionals to find ways to grow revenues, reduce the security risks, reduce your risk, reduce your problems, grow better, take care of your employees better. There's all these business challenges, and there's an insatiable appetite for programming and content that does that. So however you need to marshal your resources.
Yeah, I love a guest speaker. If you're telling me that you're going to bring a guest speaker that's going to bring some, change the lives of the customers that are in attendance, that always makes me happy. I'm like, oh, that's cool. I love education, thought leadership. That's, like you said, specific to the customer who you're trying to get excited about. Like, make it about their business, bringing in some thought leadership. That's always a cool thing to me that makes me go, oh, that's a great idea.
Absolutely. It's like, okay, you're not here to sell me, you're here to help, but you're here to help me, inform me, help me grow as an end user, help me to how do I grow my business, etc. So yeah, thought leaders, anyone outside of the vendor company, that's definitely a huge upside.
Yeah, so I want to encourage the audience, if you've got questions, please drop them in the Q&A log. Anthony, you asked about what should people be doing other than webinars with MDF, and I think we just kind of went into a good rapid fire session and answers around a lot of different ideas.
Ted, can I make one comment on that?
Yeah.
So back to the communication thing, find out from the vendors. Do they have relationships with the vendors that do, multi-touch campaigns or whatever it would be, and could we get involved in that? So that's back to the communication thing. Is reach out to the vendors.
Right, and I think that brings up another really important topic, which is, of course, have your own game plan, have your own local community of speakers you're tapping into, have your own centers of influence and ecosystem locally. But to Charlie's point, tap into the vendor content that's made available on the partner portal. Could you guys talk about kind of best practices, what you've seen work there, and what you encourage partners to look at? I mean, just be aware of.
From my standpoint, it is back to reaching back out to the CAM, to the channel marketer. Point me to where all the good content is, things that I can use. For me as a channel marketer, recognizing that there's a lot of MSPs out there that they want solution information. We're going to get you the content so that you can customize it for your own use. So it's a matter of getting onto the portal, but to Ted's point earlier, there's a lot more vendors than what I'm dealing with. Use channel marketing, use your CAM to guide you through on how to get that content. But it's on the partner portal.
Yeah, I think that there's a guy that I remember used to call me all the time back when I was at Cisco, and he was an MSP, he was a new owner starting his business, and he would call me probably every other week. I mean, I wasn't his dedicated resource. I wasn't, assigned to him in any way. I just knew this guy, and he was nice to talk to. And, every time he called, we'd always have new things to discuss, and I'd learn more about his business. And there are things where, as the relationship grew, and it was just nice to have these conversations, he would tell me areas that he's looking to grow in his business and things that I wouldn't have thought to bring up in conversation with him. Things that could help him grow his business. I didn't know could help grow his business because I didn't know what he was trying to accomplish. Those things progressively came out in discussions, and there was all sorts of programs that they signed up for over our discussions, because the more I learned about what he's trying to accomplish, the more I could say, well, hey, look, this is what we're doing to solve for that, right? And those relationships matter. You might not think that having a cadence and going into detail about what you're trying to accomplish, maybe you don't have the time, or maybe it's hard to keep up. But the more consistency you have in that communication, the more your resources at your vendor can actually help you. I mean, they want you to be successful. They're not just there to get you to sell their product. They want to know how they can make you more successful in how you're going to market, right? And that's how I approach these conversations.
Yeah, so ask for help, but really beyond that, build relationships, I think is such a vital thing. And a key thing to think about is understanding how the channel marketing and channel sales team that works on your account is compensated. How do they win? How do they put food on the table for their family? Like, ask those questions, because you go like in the stack ranking in somebody's mind, you go up to the top of the list when you open the conversation and say, how do you win? Like, how do I make you a superhero inside your organization? What do we need to do to make you super successful in your work? And if you ask that question of your CAM and your channel marketing colleagues, and then you say, and by the way, can you help me with something? You're going to be the person who gets the fastest response. You're going to get the thorough follow-up. You're going to get the inside scoop on the new budget campaign or the new program that's being rolled out, because you've shown you care on a human level about the people on the other end of that relationship.
Yeah, I can attest to that totally. And there are times where there are things that are invite only, right? And you may not meet all of the requirements, but someone will, turn a blind eye to, oh, hey, just because they're not doing X, Y, and Z, they're doing these other things. And I really am advocating for this person to be part of this group to get this benefit, right? And yeah, you'd be surprised people will stick their neck out for things like that if you build relationships with them.
Good.
So we talked a little bit about results. One of the bureaucratic, if you will, parts of the MDF process is getting reimbursed. You've gone out, you've done the marketing program, or you've gone out, you've gotten the MDF request submitted, it's been approved. You now have a green light that says, okay, go do the program. You usually, in most cases, the partner will then front the cash and the expenditure to go do the program. Then you submit a claim to get reimbursed. It's a fairly form-driven type process with most vendors, but there are ways to there are ways to better communicate the results. Can you guys share some examples of things you've seen that partners have done that kind of were very effective in furthering the relationship?
I mean, I think it's kind of like what Charlie indicated. We pay it within, I think 30 days is our say if you submit all the appropriate stuff. And I mean, obviously we know that it doesn't always take 30 days to turn around a sale and close a sale. What's the transaction time on something could be, especially when you're talking about a managed service contract. I don't know if that's going to happen for them in 30 days, but they did everything right. They showed me what they thought they were going to do, and if later on they're filling me in on, hey, I wanted to let you know the longevity of this, what the long sort of tail of this campaign was for us, and giving us some more information on that. I mean, I don't want to have a partner wait 6 months to get their money back, right? I want to pay them. So I think it's just about keeping engaged, right? Giving me a debrief on what happened, how it went, those kinds of things.
Yeah, I mean, I would say don't overthink it. I mean, The reality is, don't overthink it. Go submit the claim. Make sure you get reimbursed timely. Make sure everybody follows, dots the I's, crosses the T's. But don't overthink it. Send a simple email summarizing. I think one thing that channel marketers like to hear is what didn't work? What worked? What didn't work? What did we discover in this marketing campaign was kind of a mistake, or we stepped in it, or we're trying to get better on it? Share those pieces of insight, because that's very valuable for the channel marketer to understand, to share with other partners. Don't do that, So share what worked, share what didn't work. Make sure you capture it, talk about leads, pipeline, deals, dollars and cents, because that's hugely important. Explain how it's helping your business win new clients or upsell your existing clients, and just share that feedback. And make sure you do it. You have a communication mechanisms outside the kind of the mechanistic MDF claim process to get that information back to the channel marketers.
Right. I mean, we as the formal claim process, like you said, Ted, make sure you hit what needs to be submitted for the claim. You do all those things. You get the invoice. If you've got an attendee list, if that's it, or lead list or whatever it would be, pictures or whatever it would be, get all that done. Like Janine said, we want to get the money paid out if you hit all those points. But after the claim is done, everything else that you can we understand that, 30 days post activity, we may not see a lot of pipeline, a lot of, closed deals at all. But all that stuff, like we talked about earlier, is important for us to know to justify the program itself and justify going forward to make further investments for other programs with you.
Yeah, so that's exactly it, right? The more effectively you communicate the results, and especially what did and didn't work, marketing resources all day are asking what does or what doesn't work, and they just want to become more efficient. So if you can clearly communicate what you did, here's the results, here's what I would have liked to have gone better, here's how I'd like to see it go next time, I mean, more likely your future activities are going to get approved, right? Because, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Joe. But the other piece of that as well is that a partner that comes to me and says, hey, what didn't work? When they're thinking about those things and they're communicating to me, I'm going to say, when I'm thinking of a new program or I'm working with an outside vendor or whatever, I'm going to say, partner ABC, they said, this is what didn't work. Let me get them engaged on this program that will work. If they're having those conversations with me, I'm going to be thinking of them top of mind. Hey, they see what does work or doesn't work. Let me get them engaged in another program. I'm going to be more proactive on that side.
Yeah, when I have something new that I want to introduce and I'm going to need feedback, I know that person's going to give me feedback. Right? So they're going to think of you first.
So just a couple of minutes for some final formal Q&A. And Anthony kind of just gave us kind of a curveball right here near the end, but he has, what do you recommend if a CAM isn't performing? Where do you go from there without ruining the relationship with the vendor?
If the CAM isn't performing and from their perspective, from the partner's perspective, I think you need to let their manager know. Share that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would say, yeah.
I'd like to know like what way he means though by not performing, like not engaging with them more, not.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, well, Anthony, hopefully I can connect you with any of these speakers if you want to dig deeper on this. But I would say that, what is it? Crucial conversations, being candid. I mean, I'd start with the person. If you're in a business relationship and kind of things aren't working, start there. And if the person is, of course, not responsive to the feedback or not listening or not making improvements or not following up on whatever you asked, yeah, like to Jeannie's point, there's a chain of command. And ultimately, you've got to exercise the chain. You don't go to chain of command first. Go to the person because there's probably, there might be a lot of other stuff they're dealing with internally at that vendor organization that you may not be privy to that's really getting in the way of them being successful. And just try to be human with them first and provide some candid feedback about what you need. And then take it from there.
And if you have a relationship with someone else in the field for that vendor, so if it is the channel marketer or the systems engineer or someone else, reach out to them as well. But yeah, I agree with you. Go to the CAM first, but if you've got a relationship with someone else out in the field, connect with them and see, hey, is there a problem? Is there another way around this, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly, I'd have partners do that with me. And I'm not their dedicated resource, but they'll come to me to say where they're having challenges. And there's ways that I can listen to the feedback, honestly, that the partner is giving me where they can be more open with me than they can with their CAM, right? I can collect that feedback and translate it into a message that is going to go across better, maybe because I know that person as well. And, I can relay something that the partner is very frustrated about. Right, but in a way that doesn't upset the CAM.
I'm always an escalation point in my role now. So if the partner is like having trouble, and maybe they have tried to talk to their dedicated resource, I get reached out to all the time. And then exactly as Joe said, I can sort of act as a middleman to kind of, knowing other people in the organization that might be able to light a fire under it, or that's always a good way to do it too.
Yeah, and
Okay.
at the end of the day, you have distie resources as well. Always remember that you can go to your disties when you're not getting support from the vendor. Your disties want to help you just as much, and they have relationships with the CAMs just like you do. So.
Sure.
Okay, we are just about out of time. We ended with that tough question, but more about kind of relationships and how to keep, put all of this mechanical stuff we talked about today in a larger context of building relationships with your vendors, focusing on your strategic vendors, and really tapping into them for resources to get more than your fair share, frankly, because if you really invest in relationships and you put a lot of thinking and effort into your marketing, you will end up with more than your fair share of MDF. And hopefully everybody took some good insights and best practices and tips and tricks away from today's conversation. Hopefully you feel free to reach out to any one of our panelists today to talk with them further and dig deeper on the conversation. These are longtime friends of mine in the channel. You guys did a fantastic job today being go-givers and delivering some fantastic information. So Charlie Coughlin, Joe Mansour, Janine Edwards, thank you guys very much for a fantastic conversation today. And thanks everybody who joined us for another Iron Path Expert Series webinar. Thanks and have a great day, everybody. Take care.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Thanks for
guys.
having me.
Bye-bye.